Good evening, good afternoon, or good morning, wherever you are. Welcome to the third installment of the MBtv series, a joint initiative by Macau Business TV and Rui Cunha Foundation. This is the third debate of the series, which started with a talk on property. Then we moved on to the city's core industry, to the future of gaming. And today we will be talking about yet another pivotal matter for the development, the social and economic development of the Macau SAR, labor, imported labor, particularly blue card lovers. I mean, blue card holders, the unloved. That is a question, a way of kicking off a conversation about, obviously, the status of blue card holders in Macau and the wider issue of the labor market, the wider issue of the imported labor market. We will be focusing on what has been going on since the onset of the COVID-19 crisis, and we will be looking ahead to the much expected economic recovery and the future plans for the SAR. And to talk about these issues, to address these matters, we are joined by a distinguished panel of guest speakers, three experts with diverse backgrounds. They will help us look into these issues from different lenses. They are Seow Yuen, Managing Director at MSS Recruitment, a leading integrated HR services agency in Hong Kong and Macau. She's been with MSS since 2008. She's originally from Singapore, well-seasoned, very well experienced. She has an in-depth knowledge of the labor market in the region, Macau, Hong Kong, and Singapore particularly. We are then joined by Icília Berenguel, a well-known criminal lawyer in Macau. She's been working at CNC Lawyers for over 16 years, where her practice mainly covers litigation and dispute resolution. She is especially versed in criminal law, employment, and immigration. Icília is a registered lawyer in Macau, Portugal, and Timor-Leste. And last, not the least, we have Melody Lu, an associate professor at the University of Macau's Department of Sociology. Professor Lu has been conducting extensive research on migration regimes in Asia, reproductive and care labor, and transnational families, as well as labor mobility in the leisure and gaming industry. So we are off to hopefully a very interesting and exciting discussion, panel discussion. I'm your host, or one of your hosts. My name is José Matias. I'm the director of Macau Business, and I am helped by my co-chair Nelson Moura. He is the editor-in-chief of Macau News Agency, also under Project Asia Corporation, the publisher of Macau Business, Macau News Agency, and MBtv, as well as Business Intelligence magazine. I would like to thank Rui Cunha Foundation. We're here again. We feel at home. It is always an honor to join hands with this institution. I would like to welcome you all who are watching us via Facebook, via Zoom, and of course, those who are here with us physically at Rui Cunha Foundation for this talk. Without further delay, let me start by SY Law, or I shall say Seow Yuen, Managing Director at MSS Recruitment. You have been dealing with, you have a vantage point with regards to when we're talking about the imported labor market. And I'd like you to share with us what's been going on over these months with the dramatic impact of the COVID-19 crisis, both in terms of health and, of course, and economy and the labor market.
I think it's been obvious to all of us. It is completely unexpected. It caught us by surprise. It changed our life overnight. We start doing things that we don't used to do before. In terms of the labor market, the locals and the non-resident holders are all very much affected by what happened. The organizations, as well as the government in all the cities and countries in the world, are completely not ready for the attack of the COVID. In all aspects of the preparation, there were a lot of firefighting. Macau is in a much better situation than many cities and many countries because it's still relatively contained. Border control is easy to implement. the government has been relatively well off, able to implement a lot of good initiatives to help this labor pool. Specifically to the blue card holders, to the non-resident workers, we see a decline in the numbers versus 2019 since April for the residency holders by 23,000 people. So you see a reduction of blue card holders coming to Macau to work, and that is natural to understand because of what's going on in the economy itself. And a lot of this reduction in numbers came mainly from China, China itself, I think Vietnam, Hong Kong, Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, Europe, America as well. So that goes with the skilled and the non-skilled workers as well.
So it's pretty much across the board, right?
Yes, very much.
And in your business, of course, as an HR recruitment company, what kind of challenges have you been facing?
MSS has a whole integrated service of HR offerings. So we are able to have insights into the different aspects of the HR services provided. We provide, we're the largest part-time casual providers in the market. So basically, the gamings, the F&Bs, the retail, they all take part-time from us. So in fact, most of the staff that you see in the casinos and the hotels are mainly our staff under our payroll, but part-timers. And then we do headhunting. So we also provide staffing to the full-time headcounts, the senior executives. We have a website, hellojobs.com, which basically allows you to see what is the applications like for jobs in the market as well. So through these various aspects, we do visa application as well, payroll outsourcing, but through these various aspects of HR services that we provide, we're able to see a big decline in the number of job vacancies available in the market. We're able to see a lot of supply of labor, which has never been before in Macau. We're starting to see the labor pool being very receptive to jobs that they might not be before. They're less fussy. For example, in the past, the locals might not want to do jobs that are shift-based. You know, they might not want to do jobs that are service-orientated, but now they're open-minded. You get better quality of a pool of people to choose from as well.
So this is something that is a far cry from what you had a year ago or even
definitely. For the longest time since I'm in Macau.
Of course. We will be addressing the social impact of this situation. Now, Icília, Berenguel, with regards to litigation and seen from the perspective of a lawyer, what sort of challenges have you been noticing or experiencing in the current situation under COVID-19?
Basically, the biggest challenge is to face the dismissals and to fulfill the old rights and try to avoid the discussion in the work relationship. Of course, non-resident workers are having the same system mostly as the local residents regarding the rights and the duties. But in this case, we know that locals have priority in their jobs, and this makes the options for the employers very tough because they know they need to quit some non-resident workers, and most of the times they need them. But basically is to face the ends of the contracts that are not expected at all.
And we have been witnessing a drop in the number of blue card holders. The latest figures hints at points to about 180,000 workers. There's this. This happened already. I can recall, for instance, in the 2008-2009 crisis, which obviously was now looking in perspective, it's non-comparable at all. But back then, there was also a situation where there were a number of redundancies and a number of blue card holders did not see their contracts renewed, and there was a drop in in the number of non-resident workers. How significant is that from what you see now? And for the employers, when they have to deal with the legal implications of dealing with this, what kind of things have you noticed?
It's hard. It's hard because this pandemic situation affects all the industries in Macau, and of course, facing this economic situation and difficult economic situation, of course, is very difficult for the employers and the industry to face the expenses and the losses that they have due to this pandemic situation, and afford for these kind of compensations and rights that they need fulfill regarding the dismissal of the non-resident workers brings to the company a bigger responsibility, and of course is quite difficult for the employers and the companies.
And then
bigger or small.
Of course, and then the employees who are, because of the current situation of the lockdown, there were cases of many cases of non-resident workers whose contracts have expired, and they were overstaying because obviously they could not leave Macau, right? And how do you see this in terms of is there any sort of legal loophole there and has been dealt with by authorities in a way?
I think Macau government tried to implement some policies in order to protect those kind of situations. Namely, we know that immigration were renewing the visa for that people. Of course, in terms of staying in Macau and support their stay in Macau, they need to support themselves. But I believe that most of the contracts that were solved, they provide for the compensations, for the rights of the workers, and that money probably was the money that helped them to support during the time that they were in Macau. Namely, Macau government also helped some of the non-resident workers to get back to their home countries. Basically, they try to do their best.
In addition to the social organization, NGOs, Melody, Lou, it's talking about what you've been witnessing in terms of solidarity and the role played by this, in addition to companies and the government, to the civil society in lending a helping hand to those who were struggling to make ends meet, to the extent that it was really hard, and we still have these kind of situations with no income and stuck here. What have you been noticing in that respect as a sociologist?
I think in the beginning of the pandemics, probably like before March, the migrants who stayed behind, who didn't leave the border, they actually feel a very strong sense of solidarity with the local residents, because they feel that we are fighting this together, and they feel that they are treated equally as local residents. The government offer the same health protection for them. And then they also feel that because in this situation of one person got infected, the whole society is endangered, right? So that's very strong part. Of course, they worry about they worry about their family and then the future, but they feel that luckily I'm in Macau, and this is a place that treats us not so bad. But then gradually, I think when it goes on for a very long time, and I think they started to fear that will this temporary become permanent, become new normal? Will I be asked to work longer hours without overtime pay because I know that my employer are having difficulties? I'm mainly referring to the small, medium enterprises, and then they're willing to receive less pay or half pay, or in order to get through together. But as time goes by, they feel that especially when the border is opened, and they don't understand why some of their countrymen cannot come back to work, and and then while the border is open to the mainland Chinese. So I think at the moment they started to feel a bit that they're treated differently, and that I wouldn't use the word discrimination, but I feel that they want to answer why. Because if it's purely from the health perspective, I think 14-day quarantine should be sufficient. So they feel that they have also contributed to the Macau's economy, and they are a large percentage of the labor force. So why they are now treated differently? Yeah.
And as I was referring to what happened in previous crises, they're the first ones to be let go, and there's a sort of an approach of the non-resident workers as a kind of buffer whenever you have these kind of situations. How do you regard this? Because this has to do with the system and has to do with it seems to be arguably done by design in terms of the status of non-resident workers.
Yeah. Actually, for those who stay on, maybe many of them lost their job in some sectors. But actually in some sector, and also especially in domestic work, they are very much in demand because there's no new supply of workers. So I don't know. I haven't done a research in this respect, but I think those who stay on, they were very much sought after, and their salaries increase because they can bargain for a better salary or condition. They can pick the employers basically. And I don't know the real figure of how many of them have changed the job from other sector to domestic sector. Legally, it's not supposed to be allowed because you cannot change the sector, but since they are stuck here, I don't know how flexible is the government in terms of this. So in a sense, not all sectors suffers, right? And then some sectors have a shortage. So I think there's a lot of things that we don't know because we don't have the figure from them. Yeah.
It will be interesting to conduct research in your field in the future. Professor Melody Liu has been conducting studies on a number of issues related to labor and migrant workers, and particularly also in the case of domestic helpers. I would like to remind you all watching us via Facebook, via Zoom, you can join this conversation via Zoom, the usual practice. Nelson is keeping an eye on our Zoom participants and also on those who are joining us via Facebook. Later on, we will be having your input. Now, Nelson, there's a coincidence that we are experiencing the current very challenging situation and crisis, and at the same time, we have changes in the legislation taking effect, right?
Thanks, Matias. Yeah, it is in fact that in a time where there's a shortage of available labor, there's been changes to a lot of the labor regulations in Macau. So this year, the Macau Legislative Assembly already passed a new employment agency law, setting the rules and obligations over services offering employment and recruiting workers from abroad. And they imposed fees to be charged of workers seeking employment that cannot exceed 50% of their salary for the first month of work, and also a cap on total amount employers can be charged by agencies. In a time where there's a higher need for labor from abroad, we see this legislation being implemented for March of next year, but I guess the sector is already preparing for it. So I was very interested in knowing the opinion of Ms. Seow in terms of how do you think this new legislation will affect the employment companies sector, because it will make it harder to hire, or there'll be more steps to overcome to hire foreign labor. So do you think this may increase the prices demanded for example, domestic workers in need? Will it make it harder for companies and agencies to hire abroad? Thank you.
Right. Thanks, Nelson. What we have here is that in the past, they could come to Macau, and then they could probably do some trial jobs the employers, and then if it all gets the green light, then they apply to stay here and work. And with this new legislation, they couldn't do this anymore. It has to all start right from the home of origin, where they have the documents ready and they could come in. To begin with, I think it was never a legal option that they could come in and do a trial job and work in Macau. Probably from their perspective, it looks like a possibility for hope to come in and get a job. For the local employers, it's like, oh, I could trial the workers, and if it doesn't work out, we could just cut it off. But at the same time, this also opened the possibility for risk where workers could be exploited and you don't have a channel to go to because you're not here legally. There's no official process that's consistent and reliable for people to adhere to. It's basically up to what each one wants to do with each nationality of domestic workers. I'm not sure if that's the best option as a protection for both employees and employees. So this legislation, will it reduce the number of demand or supply of domestic workers? I don't think so. I think it's long overdue. It's basically putting in place what was missing all along.
I was also curious what Professor Melody Lu, somebody that has, of course, studied migrant workers in Macau for a while. In your view, this new legislation, will it make the local foreign labor more dependent on these agencies and therefore more vulnerable and maybe having more trouble discussing their contract situation?
I think the probably my research shows actually for the larger enterprise or company who actually already been doing the recruitment channel is already formalized through agencies. So they've been headhunting, abroad interview. So all the process is done overseas. But I think for a lot of small, medium enterprise and particularly for domestic workers, large percent of them are like what she said, that you come here and then they try to hunt for a job. So I'm just concerned that for the workers who have very low salary, for the small, medium enterprises, will this be a too high cost for both workers and for employers? And my research actually shows that for the middle, semi-skilled and low-skilled workers, migrant workers in Macau, in average, the domestic worker have to pay about double of their monthly salary at the moment before the new law is enacted. For largely goes to the recruitment fees, and the hospitality workers pay 3 months salary. So globally speaking, this is actually not a very bad figure. For migration scholars, we don't calculate how much money they pay for the brokerage. We calculate by the monthly salary, the percentage of monthly salary, because it means that they are either indebted for these 3 months or 2 months, or they have to find a way to pay back. Right. So this reduces their negotiation power when they realize for example, their labor rights is infringed, or the working condition doesn't meet what they've been promised of or according to the contract. So I want to mention also that the Macau government, I think the intention of the law is very good because they even set the percentage. They don't want the recruitment fee to be too high. But they forgot that migration is brokered as a global system. So you cannot just regulate the broker in Macau because since they cannot come here to find a job, they have to apply for the work permit abroad, which means they will have to go through the broker overseas, even in the locality. So it is very common that they have to go through multiple layers of brokers. Each they have to pay a lot. So this new law will definitely increase quite a lot of the cost for them to come. So the consequence will be Macau is not a desirable place for them to come anymore. So then I think as a Macau city residents, we have to ask, this is what we really want? If our industry or our family really need them, and if they don't come, because they have many other places to go. It's a global market. Okay. And the second is this will increase from the example of other countries, increase the debt the possibility of exploitation. It can all happen before they come to Macau. But we cannot turn a blind eye on that because eventually they are coming to work in Macau. So many countries before has solved the problem by having arrangement between the sending and receiving countries or NGOs. They try to work out a fairer system, a less exploitative system, either establishing country to country, government to government direct recruitment, or they try to regulate the recruitment agency on both sides. Right. So at the moment, the Macau government doesn't really engage in the sending side of either the business or the government or the NGOs. So I think that's something that we need to work on.
And I was also curious that considering these new restrictions, do you imagine that will basically develop the local market into a market where each employment in need has to be established, as they talk about creating a list of positions that are more in need for foreign labor, and the government would make it easier for companies to go abroad and hire for this specific, let's say, the hotel reception or for domestic workers, but there should be an exact list of the employments in need and with a quota of the number of workers in need in the city at the moment. I don't know if Ms. Berenguel has dealt with labor contracts for companies, and it's always a hard issue for companies to negotiate the quotas with the government. Do you think having a system where you know exactly which position is in need and how many workers there should be, or it's better where the demand kind of works itself out?
In my opinion, I think this measure is already implemented because to apply for a non-resident worker, we only can access to that quota, to that authorization, if we don't have in Macau market that position available, and we don't have any local that can fulfill that position. Of course, not always is easy to demonstrate that the company really needs that position, that non-resident worker. But I think the applicants should pay more attention to the regulation that states the documents and the requirements to access to that authorization. Because mostly the applications are submitted with the simple forms and are not fulfilling the requirements that are stated in the law. And we have a specific regulation for that. So if that requirements have more attention for the applicants and start being fulfilled, I think the problem that they say that exists will disappear, because in fact we have already that statistic percentage of positions that should be fulfilled and is the most required one.
And now, thank you for these first couple of rounds of issues and addressing these matters. I would now like to invite those of you who are here joining us at Rui Cunha Foundation to join the conversation. Would you like to throw in a question or compliments with, come up with some remark to enrich this conversation? So I'll open the floor for the first round of takes. José Álvares, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry for this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and to the Rui Cunha Foundation, Macau Business, for this interesting debate. My question goes to the professor. I think you mentioned, and I'm going to look a little bit like the devil's advocate, but I think it is important to always strike a balance. And in this case, the government has always been or taken a position to sort of defend a little bit of the local market. If we look at Hong Kong, the problem in a little bit has been that there was no such protection, and at the same time it drives locals' income to the point that they can't survive by themselves, or they cannot afford a lifestyle that is sort of in balance with the richness of the nation, of the region. So my question is, because in Macau you are able to sustain that, it is important to strike a balance of the locals as well. So my question is, like, isn't the government striking or able to do that precisely because of these protections, or in this case, these restrictions to the hiring of expats and the sort? But I should note, again, this is the devil's advocate position because I'm in favor of globalization and everything.
Thank you.
So I didn't really get the point what you want to ask. You mean that the government has been doing to strike a balance, to protect the local, or give priority to the locals' employment?
My question is, don't you think that's also an important consideration? Because, you know, the expat community has always plan B, which is to go back to the place where they come from, okay? The local population does not have a plan B. This is the place that they stay, okay? So what I'm saying is, shouldn't that be taken into consideration as well? And how important is that on the equation of how many protections you put in place or how many restrictions you put in the hiring of non-resident workers?
If you ask me my personal opinion, I am all in favor of protecting the citizens' employment and because I think there's no country in the world that will treat migrants or non-residents the same as citizens. The citizen has the exclusive right because they have a contract with the government, and it's a government's first and foremost application is to protect or for its own citizens. So I completely agree with that. So my question is, if there are two levels. One is if already being employed and work here, right? So the non-resident worker enjoy less rights than citizens. They have no political right. They have most of the protection of social welfare, but they are protected by certain rights like labor law or certain social benefits. So in that standard, I think they have to, because that's what our law says, that once they're in they should be treated the same. So I think for that level, they should be protected because if after they have entered. Okay. So the other level is now we're talking about, I actually appreciate very much this seminar. Is very, very timely because it seems to be in a new, we're in the path, we are in the crossroad that we know that when the border is open again, when the economy is, the economy will not be the same. We have to go through restructuring. We have to go through. So this is actually the time for government to look at the total picture of what really our the demands of our labor market, and some of them it has to be go through the locals, by all means. But then we also have to think that Macau in the future, if you still want to be a global tourist destination, we cannot rely on just one. Either locals or just from mainland China. So I think the government also have to have a more projection of the future economic direction, and then from there we develop our demands of the human resources. And then from there, then we can plan that, how much quota we are going to give for what sectors and so on.
Interesting, another fortunate coincidence is that we're having this debate just a couple of weeks after the draft of the urban master plan, the very first one was announced. And one issue has to do, of course, with population, with the, for the coming 20 years. I'd like to hear a take from each one of you on, I don't know if you've gone through in detail the blueprint, but what you've seen there or what you think is necessary in terms of a comprehensive population strategy. The blueprint points to a population of 808,000 inhabitants by 2040. Who will be the new residents or the new citizens, the people living here, regardless of holding the status of resident, non-resident, or the statuses, and what should be the direction? What should be the direction in that respect?
Sure. Just also, because
and
this
also
question relates back to what you have just asked. I think protectionism for the sake of protectionism is a very limited concept. I think protectionism very much comes back into where does Macau sees itself in the global or in the regional market. What is the role Macau is going to play in the next 5 years and the next 10 years? And what do we need to bring us to that position? So in the whole process of bringing us to the next blueprint of the next 3 years, 5 years, 10 years plan, how does the local and the foreign talents come together, you know, to play this position to bring us there? Well, this is something I don't have an answer. We all need to sit down and work on it. But it's impossible that it already has been a stage where this Macau needs a foreign label. This is without question. Macau is already a global city. Look at all of us sitting here.
Yeah.
Right, just have the camera flash all of us. Most of us are not local Macaunis. We're all foreigners working in Macau. Many of us have stayed many years here, contributed to the economy, helped build the city, helped build the economy. Macau cannot do without foreign talents, regardless what trade. If it competes on a global platform, it needs the expertise. It needs the experience because it's a relatively young economy. If it competes on a local platform, it still requires foreign talent because it's supplying services or products to international companies operating in Macau. So either way you look at it, they need the experience, they need the expertise to come in terms of labor where it requires quantity of people. They don't have the quantity as well, so it's not a choice. You have hotels that goes up to 3,000-4,000 rooms, whereas a general hotel in any city is 300-400 rooms. At that scale, you need volume, and this is something Macau doesn't have. And then you have jobs the local doesn't want to work in. They choose, which is natural. So you need the other laborers to come in and do it. Then you have jobs where other countries already have the economies of scope and scale because they have developed that kind of talents. For example, Nepali security guards. You're not going to start reinventing this manpower needs and retrain them again. For example, F&B staff from Hong Kong, casino staff from Las Vegas or from Australia. You're not going to reinvent them. Yes, you will train the locals to be on par, but that takes time. And that takes time. So where do we see Macau in the next 5 years, in the next 10 years? I think if we have that plan in mind, that vision in mind, and the blueprint, we can review back what are the things we need to put in place in terms of manpower planning, in terms of the action plans that we need, and that will have clarity much better than how much protection we should have versus local and foreigners, what it should be, but what's the basis for all those decisions?
And we hope this conversation can play a small, we can have a small contribution to this debate. Icília, Berenguel, talking about this, on the one hand, looking ahead, the coming 20 years, and also this debate, are we too protectionist? Is Macau too protectionist? What's your take on this kind of a balance between imported worker and residents, and also whether we should look at this in terms of zero-sum game or beyond that?
Definitely, Macau have two different regimes for local and non-resident workers. And we need to stop to try to put both of them in the same scale, because they are definitely different. We need to try to combine both and go forward and try to get the best choices for our community. And of course, the economy, Macau economy, will have a very important role in all this, because it will be the economy, the one who will decide which way Macau will take and will be the best options to adopt. Definitely.
The supply and demand and the transformation that we may witness in the future.
Definitely. We cannot predict which going to be the most important positions to hire, the most important skills to have it, the most important experienced people to have it, because we don't know. We need to analyze very well and see which way the Macau economy will take.
And when we look at the figures, and we're talking about non-resident workers by origin, of course, nearly 2/3 come from mainland China. And sometimes in the expat, I guess, circle, perhaps we may neglect that or not factor that in the whole discussion of how the local society and the local Chinese residents regard this. So Professor Melody Lu, this is an important factor, of course.
You mean the mainland Chinese?
Yes, in terms of the way the local, the perception and the views from the local residents, who are obviously overwhelmingly local Chinese, with regards to the lion's share of both the new residents, but this is, of course, a separate discussion with regards to the status of acquiring the status of resident, but I'm talking particularly about blue card holders. We're talking about 65%. Well,
Yes,
I was looking
Chinese.
at these figures from a couple of years ago. I believe it's still should be the case, right? In your studies, have you addressed this issue of these perceptions and this factor?
Yeah. Yes, and so your question is
The
how
question
the local
is-
people
yeah,
think
yes,
about
exactly.
that. Okay,
And
yeah.
bringing this into the equation as well,
Yeah,
to the
yeah,
discussion.
Yeah. I think Macau society is actually, Macau is an immigrant society in terms of the percentage of people who were born, who parents, either
Less
first
than
or
half
second
of the adult
generation.
population,
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were actually
yeah.
not born in Macau.
And so it's, and then I think up to there's a decades ago, let's say in daily life, Macau people are very welcoming to newcomers, right? Despite all the language, we strive to find a way of communicating with each other. And this, compared with all the other countries that have lived and worked, I think I would say it is very welcoming. It makes me feel at home, regardless that it's not because I'm working at the university. No. But I think the sentiment started to change. I think it's in around 2012, 2013, around the period of time. I think this is my research because there are several rounds of the labor protest from the car dealers, from the coupés. So that was the time that the whole issue started to be framed as local versus non-local. Because in their protest, because we know that the coupé is only reserved for the locals. So in their negotiation with the major casino operators, they want to reserve certain percentage of the local sectors, but also percentage for locals. And that was a time that they started to create these frictions, I would say. So, but in daily life, I don't really feel that, and I really feel that for the daily life, that maybe there are some kind of stereotypes or there's a cultural misunderstanding, I would say, for certain people from certain origin. And the mainland Chinese, I would say, among there's a lower skilled sector. I don't think that the fact that they speak Mandarin or the fact that they're from China really make them more easily integrated. Actually, they were equally segregated. The large percentage of what you have mentioned actually are construction workers. So
yes.
construction workers, relatively, they are very segregated from them. They don't really mingle with the locals, except on the bus. If you don't take bus, you don't see them
Yes.
because they are in the construction
Well,
site.
and you have a percentage of these who actually do not live
Yes,
in Macau.
yes.
They live across the border. And,
Yes, yes. But for the other sectors, they are very much, we can come into interacting with them. So I don't think in my experience that the Macau people have particularly picked on certain ethnicity or from origin. Yeah. For me, it's a class issue. It's not the ethnic issue. Yeah.
Okay, that's an interesting point as well. Nelson, we do have a number of people, participants, they want to join the conversation. Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
Obviously, a lot of the questions are actually concerning the discrimination that we were just, the perceived discrimination, I guess I would say, over blue cards, especially because we have a question from João Carreira. He's saying, isn't there any discrimination when mainland Chinese blue cards are the only workers that can enter Macau at this moment? While the entry of blue cards from overseas, obviously, at the moment, because of the pandemic, can't enter. And obviously, blue cards also haven't received government support in terms of the consumer voucher card. And also now blue cards will not be able to find work as tourists. So isn't there an argument to say that there is a certain separation between blue cards from mainland China and blue cards from outside of Macau?
To me?
Yeah, it's a question from one
okay.
of our...
Yeah. Well, I think at the moment the fact that only mainland Chinese both tourists and the worker can come seems to be at the level of health control, right? To contain the pandemics, but then it actually in reality is a border control policy and it's also a labor policy, but it's not being talked that way. So I think it's time that we need to really ask that, if it's not because of the health, because not quarantine, then why do we have such policy? I think the government doesn't really explain that to us. Why do they only allow the mainland Chinese to come? Yeah.
Sure, and it was a rather drastic measure when it was implemented at the time. I think for most people were talking about the speed it was implemented, not the needs of the measure itself, but the speed. If I remember, it was almost in 2 days difference that people knew that they wouldn't be able to enter Macau at the moment. And also, does the panel believe that maybe if the pandemic situation gets under control in some of the destinations that usually supply workers in Macau, would it be the time to possibly allow quarantine, possibly for blue cards coming from 14 days quarantine? And do you believe that the economic recovery of Macau is even possible without having that opening of the borders? Maybe Ms. Seow, if you
the economic recovery.
I believe it will be the right time to open up the borders for blue cards, or maybe with a quarantine. And you think that the economic recovery is even possible without allowing?
If I can answer that, you'll all pay me millions to do fortune telling. That's a very tough question, but you're asking if it's possible for economic recovery.
I believe the economic recovery, because we've been talking about the economic recovery, and obviously the government has been talking about using local workers to try to fill some of those positions.
Sure.
But obviously, at least 13,500.
The economic recovery of Macau is not dependent on the border control of blue card workers, right? The economic recovery is dependent on its interaction with the global market and regional markets, because that's where the income and the source of income of Macau comes from. For its tourism, for its gaming, for its hospitality, and for MICE. And retail, probably the top 5 industries that contribute to the revenue in Macau. So the economic recovery very much depends on the interactions of the visitors coming from those countries. And if you look at the visitors' numbers coming into Macau, the biggest numbers would be from China, and then followed by probably Hong Kong. So the recovery of these markets, the health recovery, it's very important to signify possibility of traffic flow between the countries.
And I'd like to follow because I think there was a question that this participant was raising, which has to do. Well, if we look at the figures, so non-resident workers account for it. They were accounting for nearly or just half of the workforce of
46%.
Now it's
before
the
outbreak.
Exactly, and that is over 1/4 or reaching 30% actually, or nearly 30% of the overall population. So when we had the round of cash of e-consumption cards, I must say. There were some people calling for making the case that it would be, on the one hand, helpful for their livelihood. On the other hand, even could have a positive effect on the economy to have a scheme for non-resident workers to get an e-consumption card. It might not be the same amount as residents. So what's your comment on this, Icília? How do you see this issue of whether to extend at least partially some of these things?
I have a very particular opinion.
Yeah.
This is a government decision, which was taken based on some grounds that I don't know. Reason why I think I'm not qualified to answer this question. Anyway, I can say that the subsidies that was implemented by the government have a main reason, that is to help the residents to face the difficulties, namely to face difficulties that they have, because one very important thing that most of the people forget is that the non-resident workers have a specific employment contract, is a term contract, but that kind of contract is not allowing to the employer to suspend the contract, to ask for unpaid leave, to ask for
yes, that's important to highlight that,
holidays.
Yes.
And the residents, all this can be done.
So and it was done extensively over the past months. Yes.
In my opinion, but this is my opinion, this subsidy was provided to the residents in order to protect them of these kinds of circumstances, of course.
Because of the fact that a number of them, thousands of them, and namely, say for instance, in the hospitality industry, gaming, in the food and beverage sector, etc., there were thousands and thousands of cases of non-paid leaves, and people who we had to agree, obviously, to accept that. CY, or shall I say, Seow Yuen, would you like to add something? Because you've
I
been
think we've been
this.
talking a lot about the legal frameworks and what it should have been contractually, socially, but I think putting that all aside, just from a humanitarian standpoint, we should always help, that's one. And number two, they have really contributed to the building of Macau's economy, and Macau as a city, to where it is today. The roads that you enjoy, the buildings that you're staying in, the food that's being served to you, it all been done by a lot of non-resident workers. Without them, we wouldn't have any of these privileges or benefits that come to you so simply that you don't even think about. So that already means that we are interdependent with these foreign workers. Our life is interlinked with them, whether you like it or not. And on that basis, they are together with us as one. Yes, maybe holding another nationality, but we all contribute to the same vision of making Macau a better city, of contributing to the economy. So on a humanitarian basis, I think a lot more could have been done. I'm not sure if this is discrimination or it's conscious, but one thing's for sure is none of the countries in the world were ready for COVID.
That's right.
And some of the bigger economies are still not ready.
Yes.
So
these are truly unprecedented challenges. Professor Melody Lu, there's, like, let's say, for instance, talking about the motto for our talk, Blue Card Holders, the Unloved, question mark, the issue of a number of people, and we can see that from the questions and from the interactions that we've got, that sometimes we come across some remarks, statements which do not sound truly fair, or do not seem to take into account what Seow Yuen Law was referring to the absolutely crucial contribution that blue card holders are having in their role for the local economy and society. Personally, your personal view, not necessarily only as a scholar, what's your take on this?
Well, personally, I wouldn't be here if I don't have a helper at home. Because how can I take care of young children during this? I mean, it's every parent's nightmare, right? When children don't go to school. So I would say that the Macau society can get through this, the period of lockdown, and maybe there's no visible economic contribution, because people don't go back to work. But the household, the economy, the survival, I think that's very much the contribution that may be invisible but has to be acknowledged. I wanted to follow what we've just earlier discussed, that at the moment, we because the framework is to divide citizen and non-citizen, right? And then they also divide the rights entitlement as zero and sum game, right? 0 or 100%. But I think if we are now living in a global city, when a large percentage of people are non-resident workers, and for a long period of time they stay here and work here, I think maybe you could have challenge ourselves for a new framework that, of course, for political rights, right? Or even like long-term rights, like pension and so on. Of course, it's exclusive for the citizens or for the residents. But there are certain social rights or social protection that could be for everybody who live in the city. We use city as a unit, because when we are talking about COVID virus, it's the city, it's this space that's the unit, not the country or the region, right? So everybody in this world is equally vulnerable. So I think, so if we can think about these social benefits, like maybe the consumption cards or other subsidies or medical expenses and so on and so could be applied to the workers, because as long as they live here, they contribute and they are entitled to that. But the moment they leave, they lose that right. So it's the concept of the entitlement of the right based on you actually live there. We live here as one group, as one community. And I think it makes sense for the public health, because for public health, one fell sick, everybody is endangered. So I think maybe this time that we can apply this, I would like to propose that we think this way, so that we don't just think about 0, 100% or migrant residents versus non-residents.
Nelson, more questions, I'm sure, from participants joining us via Zoom or Facebook.
Yes, we have a question from Ksenia Kuzmina, and she asks, there have been statements that companies will later replace the laid-off foreign employees with local talent. And there she asks the panel, how is this possible if the unemployment rate in Macau is rather low, even now? So I imagine she's referring to the fact that unemployment rate has grown gradually since January. And obviously there's less non-resident workers, but companies and the government have talked about replacing some positions with foreign talent. Do you think this is possible? Professor, maybe Ms. Seow, if you will be able.
Can
you think that the current local offer of human resources is sufficient to fill some of the positions, let's say in the hotel sector at this moment?
Right. I think just now we kind of went through this again. So there are a few reasons that impact on the supply and demand of foreign labors, of non-resident manpower, as you call it. One is the quantity required, which Macau doesn't have the quantity because its population is only 640,000 people. Another one would be some of the jobs the locals are not willing to do. Previously, shift jobs are very much avoided and often fulfilled by non-resident workers who are open to take jobs of this nature, or maybe cleaning jobs, or some other security jobs. Yeah. So this is not a choice of whether the employees or the government want to make a mandate on it, but there are a few stakeholders making the decisions. Another reason is also the experience and expertise required in certain management roles, certain specific technical jobs which are not available here. For example, becoming focused on the financial sectors, where they want to do a RMB clearinghouse, but you don't have that expertise in Macau, so it's not a choice. You have to get the foreign talents in to push the initiative through.
So you believe that there should be a long-term planning from local authorities of these talents? There's been a lot of talk of developing Macau as a
I think it's a holistic plan. It's not just on the number of manpower you need. Yeah. It's as well working together with the education sectors. What are the talents you need to train, or you need to have the courses for it to build the talents that's required in the economy? That's why just now we mentioned about the 3 years plan, the 5 years plan, and the 10 years plan, because that gives you a longer perspective where you want to be, and then what you need to put in place. And what you need to put in place is not just the number of manpower, but what kind of manpower, what kind of skill sets, what kind of educations, and in terms of that, what kind of social infrastructure you need to support this manpower. whether it's foreign workers or whether it's local residents. Even with the non-resident workers coming in, you bring in another 100,000 of people, 20,000 number of people. It just look like numbers on paper, but on the weekend they got to be somewhere.
The urban.
Then they take the public buses. I'm sorry, but you know, humans are like that. Then it irritates the locals. Then you start to further divide, and it's just little things like that that just kick off certain sparks. And these are things that you need probably a committee or department or someone somewhere to take the lead to actually study the various aspects and implications of having foreign workers in the country and how you could help assimilate them, integrate them, so you became a first-class city where yes, you're from different nationalities, but you understand the boundaries, you reduce the differences, and you make it a lot easier for people to work side by side for that common vision of Macau. And this is something I think we could look at if we have a blueprint of where Macau should be in the next 5, 10, 20 years.
Can I follow that?
Yeah, sure.
Sure, go ahead.
I think because earlier you mentioned about all sorts of planning the government is trying to do. So I observed that the problem is that they are not talking to each other. So for example, you have a population planning who actually only look at the local residents, maybe including some migrants, but they never include tourists. But tourists is starting in the past is permanently more than 10% of the population who use the public infrastructure, right? And then you have the urban planning sector who doesn't really take into account of the migrants or visitors as well. So they look at the local citizens when they build housings and so on. So the manpower as well, they are not looking at they either look at local, but they don't look at the long-term planning of what kind of foreign manpower or talent that we need. So it's really more integrated, holistic, this kind of planning that we need. So I completely agree with
Thank you.
idea. Yeah.
Yes. Perhaps anything you'd like to add?
Yes, definitely. Training course to be implemented in Macau as a measure to help the qualified workers and will be the local or non-local residents to help to make bigger the qualification of the service that are provided in Macau. And definitely we need to stop seeing the things like residents and non-residents. We are a community. We need each other. We are here to serve each other because Macau definitely don't have enough population to serve and to support all the industries that we have in Macau. So we need them.
So we're one in a very unique city, which against many odds over the centuries have managed to rise again like a phoenix, and so hopefully it will happen, and hopefully it's taking shape. I'd like to ask and welcome contributions from the audience. We have here Susanna, please.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just have a single question. Considering that we want, and if we look to the future, and we want to be in 10 years in an international city, and we want to provide international good quality services, Macau, and we don't have sufficient locals, the restrictions that are being imposed in the law for the non-resident workers come to Macau, the fact that sometimes they need to go through several layers of companies or import labor companies to come to Macau, it will not create as a big problem in the future of not, as the professor said, Macau not being a good place to come, because they need to pay a lot to start working in Macau, not only in Macau because the law established the maximum amounts to pay, but for the agencies outside where they need to go to come in, and also the difference that of treatment that here is imposed for the residents and non-residents. this will not create as a problem in the future where we will not have enough manpower to work here and to put us where we want to be in the future, like the international and a big quality level of services that we want to provide to Macau and to the residents and to the tourists?
Anyone would like to?
I think basically what she's asking is how do we make Macau a desirable place for non-residents to want to come and work here and stay here and contribute to the economy?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
But the problem is this new law, or the restriction that in this moment are being imposed by the law, will not create a problem to that, will not create more difficulties to what we want in the future?
When we go through the labor process, it's between two countries. Let's say here in China, here in Philippines, here in Cambodia, here in Vietnam. You're talking about two sets of laws. And that's only so much to what each country can work upon, which is its own laws within its country or its city. I think the good news is in the most desirable place to work in the world, you have many little city islands or city-states in the top 10. They probably operate on a much larger scale compared to Macau, but some of them, like Hong Kong, is an open economy. Some, like Singapore, is not. They have ratio of local workers to foreign labor. They have still certain form of protectionism. And many of these economies are in the top 10 of the most desirable place to work in the world. I think there are many examples we could learn from them that we could adapt to Macau. And that's a good area to look into. And I do agree with what you say, that there's a lot more we can do.
Talking about benchmarking, which could be, one of those city-states or cities, globalized cities that Macau could draw some inspiration from. In addition to Hong Kong,
every city is unique, but I think it's very much a chicken and egg thing. When Singapore was bringing in a lot of foreign laborers, the local had a lot of issues with it. They were very unhappy. They said, "Oh, you're taking away all my jobs, you're taking the cheaper laborers, and these people are all ganging up together. Then you have a whole department of that nationality who are being sidelined." Very similar, people feel threatened. Then, our Prime Minister before, Ms. Lee Kuan Yew, came up and took a position and said, "Look, have you not thought that if these foreign talents are not here, the companies will not even invest in this economy, and you won't even have your job? So how do you want to look at this issue in perspective?"
This is the issue.
Right? So he kind of tried to do a paradigm shift whereby you cannot just focus on your job per se, but you have to look at it on a bigger landscape, on a bigger platform of what having the foreign laborers together with you is not just about the job, but also creating an environment where it's worthwhile for global companies to come in and invest in the market.
So kind of, if I may take a step
Right.
forward or a step further, when you have this kind of message coming from the top, it helps. Or someone who could be somewhat inspirational, or
Right.
A figure like that of Lee Kuan Yew in the case of Singapore, right? Interesting.
Can I
yes,
follow
you
on
are
that?
also very familiar with Singapore, of course.
I think what you have mentioned now, probably I wanted to discuss it two dimensions. If we're talking about the let's say lower or semi-skilled, low-skilled workers, somehow I think most of the country will treat them as let's say replaceable, right, disposable. So what probably we'll need to worry about is if the cost is rising, they don't want to come. Then if we need them because of the volume of the economy, then simply our industry will suffer because they have to pay more because we need them, and then you might have to attract them to come, then you have to pay more. Or you will attract the kind of labor that doesn't really qualify what we need, right? That's one thing. So again, I think Macau general public have the sort of the perception that well, you don't like it, you don't like it, you complain about the working condition or salary, then don't come. They always have this attitude. But then, okay, if they don't come, what happened to Macau, right? So that's one thing. And the second dimension is we're talking about the top talent, the skilled migration, the experts. And I think Singapore will be the model for that because most of the country who recruit, they have the part sort of, Singapore is the best. They have several layers of the system based on the skill level. And I think what happened in Macau in the past few years is that it used to be that we wanted to attract investment or high-skilled labor, and then we offer them temporary and then eventually permanent residence. And in the past few years, it's getting very, very, very difficult, or even frozen. For some are for policy reasons, some are for bureaucratic reasons. We all know that. So I think this will make, in that level of market, I think Macau become less attractive because even though these experts, they wanted to be mobile in the world, but they also want to have a possibility to settle, right? And then also concerned about the schoolings, and so they want to bring their family. So, for example, for university, if we come to work at university, we want to settle. We want to bring our family here. We don't want to move around to different destinations. So then, we were promised that we will get residency. Well, my other colleagues, and then they couldn't get it. So many of them actually left within a few years. Because it's not, so for the higher level, for the knowledge worker, for the talent worker, the fact that they're able to settle and bring their family is very important. And I think Macau need to work on that too. Yeah.
And Icília, Berenguel, you are very, very well, very experienced in this. You've been dealing with so many cases. Share with us your views on this issue of attracting talents with the status of resident, or even if they are hired firstly, as non-resident workers, the transition to the status of resident.
Of course, the skilled non-resident workers can be granted with a residency after applying for the blue card. Of course, after can access to the residency. The residency requirements are tight and more difficult to fulfill. But that doesn't mean that is not possible. Of course, we need to see in which perspective the government is trying to grant this kind of residency in Macau. And most of the times, is the skilled workers. Why the skilled workers? Because Macau needs the know-how, the experience, and it's possible for the skilled workers to access the Macau residency. The same doesn't happen to the unskilled one and for the domestic. If should have opened a chance to that unskilled and domestic workers also access to that opportunity is a big issue that is difficult to answer. But I don't think that is more, it's impossible or more difficult. Times are different, and the requirements and the needs, of course, are different also, and we need to see in that perspective way.
Different from 15 years ago?
Absolutely.
When we were...
15 years ago, in 1 month, you can get your residency.
That's
Nowadays, it's taking a little bit more because the requirements are tight.
And particularly when depends on the channel, and it's through the Macau Investment and Promotion Institute or the arrangement which is still possible differently
different
through
ways,
the immigration.
yeah, different proceedings.
Nelson, surely some of our participants are asking questions with somewhat follow-up questions on what we're talking about, right?
Well, they're asking, a lot of them are asking about the perception of a double standard in terms of, the government has said that some qualified workers that are deemed essential for the Macau economy would be allowed to come to Macau in quarantine, namely drivers for the Grand Prix, while at the same time blue cards are not allowed to enter at this moment. So they're asking if you think that this is a double standard that the government is displaying, and that maybe they should expand this possibility to enter in Macau quarantine for these workers that are deemed essential for Macau. I don't know if anybody would.
Yeah, I found it very hard to explain to my student that the Grand Prix driver can come, but your lecturer cannot come.
Yes.
So, and we are talking about across the spectrum, not only the so-called the lower skill or manual labor. We're talking about high-level workers as labor as well. So, yeah, and but whether it's really only opening for mainland China, I think that the government probably concerns about opening up for the tourists to come, and then because of that, they also have to couple with the workers. I'm concerned. I don't have an answer for that, but I'm concerned that the things we all see that if we get through this COVID-19, economic will be restructured to a certain sense, right? And I don't know whether it's intentional or whether it's just, it happens so that the way that the priority will be given to the worker from mainland China across the whole levels, because it seems to be in tune to the picture of the Great Bay Area integration. But then I think in the Great Bay Area integration, it's not very, it talk about mobility of the people, but it doesn't really talk about labor issues. And then I think when in the discussion of the Great Bay Area, it doesn't talk about non-Chinese workers in the region. So I think that's something that I'm a bit concerned that if this is going to be the turning point, whether they will take a policy turn to prioritizing mainland workers. I don't have an answer. Do you have a?
I don't have an answer, but then to put it in perspective, as long as you're not the one that's being let in, you will feel discriminated.
Yes.
So someone somewhere have to feel discriminated. Yeah, and also maybe to bring it back in perspective, I think a lot of decisions are driven by economics. So that probably explains why sometimes certain decisions are taken.
And Professor Melidou touched in an important topic in terms of, we've been talking about integration in the Greater Bay Area, and I wanted to ask the panel if you think that the workers from the Greater Bay Area in the future would be able to fulfill these positions in Macau in a scenario where it would be harder for, let's say, workers from Southeast Asia to come here. Do you believe if it was a higher mobility between Macau and the Greater Bay Area for workers, it would be possible to fulfill some of these positions?
I think the mobility is only necessary if the talents required in the Greater Bay Area, Macau is able to supply. And from the initial review of the kind of talents they require and the trade that is being pushed through the initiative in the Greater Bay Area, it didn't seem like Macau has the kind of talent to fulfill that requirements. In addition, I'm not sure about the education sectors, if they are putting in place training and courses so that they could fulfill those manpower requirements that the Greater Bay Area offers as well. But right now, it didn't seem like the talents would come from Macau.
Could they come from, like, let's say, talent
within China?
From within China, Guangdong,
Hong Kong?
Guangdong.
Yes, yes, definitely.
It's important. I don't know.
But some of the sectors we are not even competitive with China, so they are not necessarily wanting to come to. They might not necessarily want to come to Macau. For example, for the domestic workers, we do have a scheme for the mainland Chinese domestic workers in the limited as a trial, but it doesn't really work because the domestic worker nannies will pay much higher in major Chinese city than in Macau. So we are not really competing, not necessarily competitive in terms of attracting labor to come.
How about the other way around? When we're talking about labor mobility, maybe, or sometimes we may be too Macau-centric when we look at the Greater Bay Area and the integration in the Greater Bay Area. How about the other way around, of not importing but exporting labor? Perhaps people could find some interesting job opportunities once there's some sort of labor mobility in the region.
You mean from Macau to overseas?
Yes, to the Greater Bay Area cities.
I think everything will depend the policies that will be implemented. And before we have an answer for that question, we need to have other answers, namely which going to be the policy for the people circulation. It will be like Europe, it will be different, how it can work. So I think it will depend the policies and the regulations that the Greater Bay Area will implement it.
Well, in terms of free circulation of goods, of course, we already have it. But how about services, people in the capital and labor?
This is the big question.
Exactly. And the blueprint, which was unveiled last year, does not answer in detail some of these questions. Right? Anyone else? I think there's already plenty of food for thought, but we still have 5 more minutes before dinner time and wrapping up our talk. Any remark, any question, anything that you'd like to add from our audience? Nuno Sardinha da Mata.
Just 2 quick questions. I think some of them were already touched here, but I just wanted to look at it on a different perspective. We have on the non-resident labor market, I'll say, two different axes. One is skilled and unskilled. The other one is mainland and the rest of the world, because these are 2 different schemes. And my question, José Carlos a little while ago talked about, I think, his general numbers, not divided by skilled or unskilled. 65% of the workers came from mainland. But as Professor Lu was saying, quite correctly, a lot of them are from construction workers, so non-skilled workers. I believe, it's my idea, I don't have numbers, but you probably have, and that's why I'm putting the question right now, is that majority of unskilled workers that came to Macau are from mainland China. The same doesn't happen with skilled workers. I believe, or the vision that we have is that from the point of view of skilled workers, the majority of them come from other parts of Southeast Asia and probably even from Europe or some other places. So my question is that situation changing right now? Meaning there are more skilled workers coming from mainland China, from across as the time passes, and China is evolving also in terms of supplying labors to Macau, and how you see that is going to evolve in the future, this kind of relation regarding skilled workers coming from mainland China to Macau. The other question is not related to numbers, is we have been talking here about skilled workers and their importance to Macau. Of course, unskilled workers are also very important for some other reasons, but the skilled workers mainly tend to supply workers with talents that Macau doesn't have or doesn't have in enough number to fulfill the needs of the Macau economy and the Macau companies. my question is, I know that those talented workers that come as skilled workers on the companies where they work, they do some training for the other company workers, and could those skilled workers also be their talent be used also in other kinds of training for preparing more the Macau workers and Macau talents, and to develop Macau talent on those specific skills that the skilled workers bring to Macau?
Like a transfer of know-how from those talents, those skilled workers who are imported labor into the local labor force. This has been an issue that has been widely mentioned by the authorities. Is it happening? Do we need more? How to do it? Perhaps, Icília.
I think definitely is a improvement that the government can implement it, because we all will benefit from this trainings course. It's win-to-win. The local employees, or even the non-skilled employees, will win. The companies will win because we'll be more qualified, have better services, and we will have the qualified workers providing for the know-how, the experience to the others, and create more qualifications in Macau. Definitely is one of the improvements that Macau government should think to take in the future.
So to promote this, what kind of initiatives could be taken? CYLO.
Back to your question. The training of the local staff, it's definitely critical because you would like to bring them up to certain expertise or levels. But is that solely the responsibility of the skilled employees? No. That would very much be a Russian roulette, because then you get some good skilled employees and some not so good, some who can do training and some who cannot. Again, the bringing up the skill level and experience of the local employees has to be a concerted effort within the Macau community, from the education sectors, the vocational sectors, skill set, academic knowledge, from maybe the apprenticeship or the trainingship, from having a leadership and voice to say what is important because of the blueprint we had in place. This is what we believe in, this is the vision we have. We need to build this pool of expertise in the market, and the stakeholders have to come in and do this together. So one of which is the education system, then you have the organizations as well, and then you have the the adults education sector as well. It all has to come together and be aligned on that blueprint. So it's not the role of any one to come in and build the talent pool on their own efforts. But I think it's important, of course. But it's now very much left to your own devices, right? Yeah.
If I could quickly answer that, I think to a certain level, yes, but there are limits. Particularly in the service sector and hospitality sector, I think it's not only about the skill that you learn. It's about it's about how you interact with people. It's affect, right? It's how even it's not even the language itself. It's your demeanors, the atmosphere that you generate. And I think if you want to train local citizens to do that, it's possible, but then you need to take them abroad to work in the other cities, the other places, to learn what is the multicultural, what is international. And I think probably our local labor force in hospitality, most of them don't want to work abroad. And I think this is really limited to Macau as the potential as the global destination of the hospitality and tourism. Because then they think that coming to a Chinese city, this doesn't really feel that much difference from the other Chinese cities. So, so Just last week, I went to stay in a hotel. It looks very fancy, great, but I feel that I'm in China. It doesn't feel I'm in Macau. I'm sorry to say that. They're very polite, very nice, but it's different.
Nelson, thank you. I think we still have time. If out of those questions that our Zoom participants share with us, is there any question that could be a pre-wrap-up of our talk? without repeating, yes. So something that would...
Oh, well, I have a question from Leanda Kerr. She asks, many non-Chinese workers are beginning to feel disenfranchised and restricted in Macau. And how much does the integration with China has played a role in this?
Okay, so anyone would like to comment on this? Do you agree that there's this kind of, or do you, when you talk to people, that you have this feeling?
I think I mean, what I've observed so far is sort of unintended because of the border control, right? So that's what earlier I said, that I don't know it will be the policy turn, that after economic recovered, then shift to the prioritizing importing the Chinese worker. But I hope not, because then, like I said, Macau will be just another Chinese city. It's not Macau anymore.
It is a Chinese city, but of course a special one.
Yes. But it's the uniqueness of Macau.
Yes.
Yeah.
When we look at a fundamental question of non-resident workers or imported labor being a means to an end or an end in itself, my point is that obviously there's a policy, of course, which regards non-resident workers as playing a supplementary role to meet the needs of the society and of the economy. However, if you're dealing with a percentage such as 46% of the workforce or 27% of the population, shouldn't there be, like, on the one hand, a pathway for residency? We have already addressed this, and then on the other hand, policies or amendments to the current labor laws and regulations as a whole to kind of further make them feel at home. Especially, my question regards not so much the non-resident workers who've been in Macau for a couple of years. I'm talking about those who've been here for 10, 15, 20, or even more years. Shouldn't they be regarded differently from those who are here effectively temporarily? Because temporarily becomes permanent without having a status of a permanent resident, right? What do you think about all this? Ideally, I mean, in terms of what could be...
We have in the non-resident workers law, we have one principle, that is the temporality.
That's right.
The temporality says that the non-resident workers are allowed to work in Macau, and is not stipulated a time frame. They have a term contract. The term contract could be renewed, and you don't have any number of renewals. I think that if we implement a time frame in that principle, could help maybe to put the non-resident workers that are here in Macau more than 10, 15 years, for example, and I'm talking namely the domestic helpers. They may assess to the residency, for example, for those that are in Macau more than 15 years. That means give some time frame in that principle. Could be something that it will be more welcomed for the non-resident workers, because they can establish a relation, and they can see, and they can organize their lives, and if they really want to settle in Macau, they can have that chance after the 15 years and see the Macau ID as a chance to be granted.
Interesting. So that would also allow after, say, for instance, 15 or 20 years or 30 years,
For example,
some sort of labor of mobility that they, of course, labor mobility. I mean,
Why
that,
not give some time frame to that principle?
would you like? This is an interesting this idea being floated for consideration. Seow, Yuen,
I think it's
Lo.
difficult to answer on behalf of what's the plan or vision the government has. Because I think for every country to take a decision like this, definitely there would have been a reason.
Sure.
Like what is the composition of your population in terms of the background, in terms of the education level, in terms of the income level that they could contribute to the economy. I do not know what is driving the decision here, and I think that would have a big impact on the decision.
So this would be taken in as a whole, as in a more holistic perspective.
Right.
Melody, any comment on this?
I don't think it's possible. I can have a very clear answer to that. First of all, Macau has already have a population pressure. So if you allow, because we're talking about very large percentage, right? And also our largest expenses, government budget is welfare, social welfare. So if you allow them to settle, that means also you have to grant them the entitlement to all the welfare. And I think very few countries in the world actually are, even the richest economy can allow all the migrants to be entitled to this, just simply because the economy and the population cannot handle that. So in the past, in Western Europe, they abandoned this what we call guest worker program, guest worker policy, meaning they are I call permanently temporary, right, or permanently transient. Because they realize that you open the door and then they become citizens, then you have the whole and then it's the population size, but it's also the ethnic relations among the locals, because they become permanent. And they will bring their family, and then they have children as well. So we're not talking about that person, we are talking about all the family or the person that potentially could migrate together with, from that person. So I don't think it's possible, and I think most of the country who actually grant the welfare entitlement to migrants, they close the door to the guest worker policy. They cannot afford that.
Well, now that we are already a couple of minutes beyond hour, but we still have surely 1 minute or something that would be a final take to sum up, or anything that you would like to add as an important message for this debate and this discussion. Seow, Yuen, anything that you'd like as a sum up for this talk? Or a message, a key message that you'd like to convey?
Probably that we could all remember that we're still one world very much. In fact, if anything, the key message from COVID-19 is that we have to be coexisting together, independent on each other, to get through even COVID. You know, just the supply of masks alone and the oxygen equipment itself, it's already creating a big issue for all the countries in the world. And then we realize it's kind of pointless to draw the lines and be segregated, because basically that's not possible if we're going to live in, we're going to, because depend on each other. So on that basis, even on a manpower mobility for economies to grow, especially on a market like Macau, where we require foreign talent, I think it's important that we embrace diversity. It's important we have that mindset. It's important that it's inculcated to the locals from a young age, from the educational system, from a home education as well, that this is the way for Macau to be a world-class city and to compete effectively in the global market. I think this is important.
Icília, Berenguel.
My last word, it will be, this is a difficult time for Macau, and it is a time that we need to be together to face all this pandemic situation and to push Macau economy for the levels that are the one that are the loved one, that is the highest one. So I think all these kind of discussions and the critical comments that coming non-residents, residents, we are all one. We need each other. So it's not a question of be the unloved one or the loved one. We are one, and we need together. We need to be together.
And in a way, Macau is the special one, at least a special one. Is it a sort of community of shared destiny for mankind, Melody? Your final word.
For womankind. Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, I like very much the title of this seminar, the blue card, the unloved one, question mark. Because all the discussion today, we're actually talking about we are the one who is needed but not loved, right? Or needed and undesired. Or needed but can be thrown away anytime. That kind of idea. So, and then I think my last take is that following the message is the same, that let's try to move beyond this divide of 0 to 100% or residents and non-residents, and consider that at this moment we are living in this city and we are on the same boat.
And with this, we wrap up our talk. Thank you very, very much, our distinguished panel of the speakers, Seow, Yuen, Melody Lu, Icília, Berenguel, Nelson Moura, my co-chair, all of you who have been watching us, following us via Facebook, via Zoom. Thanks for your questions. Our apologies for not being able to accommodate all questions that Nelson, we have a number of more questions. But of course, keep on following us. Thank you very much. All of you who are here at Rui Cunha Foundation. And of course, as always, I'd like to thank the Rui Cunha Foundation for this joint initiative. We will be back soon with the fourth installment of the MBtv Debates series. Stay tuned. Thank you very much, and see you next time. Thank you. Thank you.